Hello everybody, my name's Martin McKenna. I would normally say welcome to sunny Edinburgh, but today I popped by Neil's office in Portugal.
Yes, Martin McKenna is here next to me in sunny Portugal. Or is he? My name's Neil Farmond, and today we're going to be talking to you about live motion, which is a feature in Ecamm Live that allows you to transition your cameras, graphics and various overlays in a nice, smooth motion way. Now, Martin's going to walk you through how to create your live motion for your various scenes in Ecamm Live. And as you can see here, Martin's built this profile that can be used in a vertical or a widescreen format. And Martin, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've done here and how this could be used in a practical example for people joining us on Zoom?
So I guess what we wanted to do here was just demonstrate some of the capability of the live motion facilities and look at some of the nice ways that you can carry out transitions with live motion. Now, you could go totally mad and have people flying all over the place with live motion, and I suspect there might be a little bit of that going on once people start to grab things. But having played with it for quite some time now, I've learned a few little tricks to do some really creative things with live motion. And one of the things that I really like is this sort of look and feel that we have between us at the moment. So we wouldn't actually put this particular layout onto the screen, but if you can imagine the center section is in a vertical format, this is the kind of thing that we do with the limited screen estate in a vertical format, but you could do the same in widescreen format or something similar. But what we wanted to do was to be able to bring in our guests, and these could be Zoom guests. Obviously at the moment they're all AI generated mountaineering people, and they all have got wonderful teeth and beautiful skin and not that realistic in comparison with most mountaineers I've met. But if we had our first guest on and had a little chat with them, we could then basically segue on the second guest in a kind of carousel. So rather than have images floating over one another, what we're doing here is just bringing them around. So each time we've got a new person coming on, everybody shifts to one side, and then the left hand side becomes the main image, and the main image then, once we transition again, becomes smaller on the right hand side. So we're not getting images that are crossing over with one another, they're just sort of gently segueing into one another. And all of that is just with live motion on Ecamm. What I'm going to do is walk you through the principles of live motion, and you can get a free profile by visiting streamprofiles.selfie.store, as it says at the top of the screen, so you can go through all of this with me. That's probably the easiest thing to do, so just pause this video and go and get that profile. You can download it, and then in one click it will pop up into Ecamm. And live motion creates kind of a new way of thinking about scenes to some degree, because the principle of it all is that you place your hidden cameras on scene A and your full cameras on scene B. And it doesn't have to just be cameras. Live motion will also work for images, web widgets and screen shares as well. There are some slightly different behaviors that I've noticed, and there isn't a manual for this stuff, so it's all a bit of a guessing game and experimenting, so do experiment with me. If you've downloaded that profile, just allocate yourself to camera A, and then you can just flip down the different scenes and you'll see exactly what you're seeing on the screen here, but with you instead. So I'm going to use the term cameras all the time, rather than list out cameras, screen share overlays, web widgets, images. So the same applies to all of them, but I'm just going to use cameras as an example here because I think that's the easiest way to talk about things. So live motion itself is basically a transition from one slide to a second slide. So you will find that in the preferences you can set up live motion as your default preference for your transition if that's what you want to do. Now personally, I tend to set mine up as slower cross dissolve because that's my favorite transition. But then what I do in the drop down menu under options, you can do options per scene and then choose what transition you want. So you go options, transition, live motion, and that means that you make a distinct decision that it is a live motion transition that you want to use. And you don't want to use these all the time for everything. I thoroughly predict there'll be a load of interviews in particular and presentations where people will be getting seasick due to the fact that you're chucking stuff all over the screen. So use them sparingly, but if you do use them sparingly, they can be, pretty cool. And I'm going to show you some kind of interesting stuff first of all, run through it all, and then we'll come back and have a look at some bits and pieces in my Bête Noire live demo mode. So where we sit at the moment on this main screen, I have got some hidden bits and pieces going on behind me. Now let me just transition to the next scene. So here you can see that I have transitioned up the way, which to be honest is not a lot different from what we could do before. So you could just apply an animation onto my camera and it would fly up the way in almost identical fashion to what you've just seen there. However, that's now done by live motion. So I have to, in my previous scene, have my camera positioned down below where I am at the moment, but then set the opacity to 0 for that camera. So you go into the options for the camera and then set the opacity to 0, and then on this scene I position it where I want it to be with the opacity at 100%, and it moves from the one below to the one above using a transition rather than you having to go and set an animation for that particular element. So those first two we've just seen, where I slide in from one side or I slide in from the bottom, they're very similar to the fly-in transition that we had that you could apply to an individual element. However, we can now do some other stuff too. So if you look at this one, I've kind of wiped in on this particular occasion, and the way that I've done that is I've actually put effectively a cropped version of my camera hidden to the left hand side of the screen, so over that way, and then made me expand. So if you can imagine a cropped version of the camera expanding, that's all Ecamm is doing, is just doing the maths to go from A to B. So if I disappear again, you'll notice this time I kind of went down to the bottom corner there, and that's where I'm coming out of. So down in that corner there, me smaller, me bigger. So what I have done, again, I've put a small version of the camera down in that bottom corner, having shrunk it down, set the opacity to 0 on scene A, and then on scene B, this is me full screen again. So I'm going to do the same thing again, because where you position that tiny camera, if that's what you want to do, i.e. have the things grow out the way, makes all the difference. So in that case, it was on the bottom corner down that corner. This time it's going to be from the center, but I'm still going to grow. So you can see it's grown from the center there. So obviously we need to complete the set, so I guess I need to go that way, up that way, and bring things in from there. Now bear in mind, this isn't just for cameras, even though I'm using a camera as an example. This could be for an overlay or an image or something like that, and you can combine them with several elements together, which I will do a little bit later on. But this goes to show you that you can move elements to different positions on the screen when they're hidden, and then when they're revealed, then it will move from wherever you've hidden them to wherever it's revealed. So that makes a big difference. If I started moving things to that side of the screen, then all of the transitions would come from over there instead. So go have a play about with that and have a look at the scenes. I've made them as simple as possible in that profile, so absolute minimum, very little on them. I think the only clever bit that's done is there's actually a white block directly below me, and that just allows me to transition the camera apparently into the center of the screen, but actually it's going from behind a white block. So that's directly below me, and in some of the scenes I put a white block directly above me as well, and that just allows me to give the illusion of just moving things around without going off the edges of the screen. You'll also notice there's a frame around the screen, a light grey frame in some cases, but not in this particular profile, but in some cases I just hide things behind the frame because I think it looks neater to transition out from behind the frame than just the edge of the screen. So those two, not particularly, well, they are quite different, but these ones are more different. So in this particular case, it's a wipe up from the top of the screen. So it's not the whole image moving as one, which it would if it was a fly-in transition. It's an actual wipe. So it's quite a nice reveal. I can do it from the top, the bottom, the left, the right, whichever I want to do it from as well, and it will do a nice wipe for me. So you can't control the speed of that. That's the only thing. Feature enhancement, Ken and Glenn, I'd love to be able to control the speed of this. So all the live motion just happens at whatever speed Ecamm wants it to. You can't control that. However, there are some neat tricks that you can do. So in this next one, you'll note that I sort of shrunk into the middle of the screen. And now I'm going to reveal myself into the middle of the screen as well. So I've done that by compressing the camera down using the crop options, so that it's a long, thin camera in the middle of the screen. And the trick here is do not move that camera from the center of the screen. If you want to move any objects up or down or left or right in Ecamm, if you hold down the space key and move them, it will move them in a straight line. So you definitely want to do that, because if you want to move slightly to one side, then Ecamm is going to go to that side and bring things up much more like the wipes that we had earlier. So it won't give you that nice reveal, which is a line like that. So opposite of that, I can do a reveal where I've cropped the camera right down in the center of the screen, set the opacity to 0, and then let it open out into the full screen again. So that could be just revealing a set of guests or revealing a set of images or something you were talking about. So it can be quite nice when combined with other bits and pieces. So let's move on a little bit. So all of that, those 9 different reveals are in the profile. Go have a play about with those. If I go on to the next bit here, we're going to be just having a look at guests. So one thing you might want to do is be on with a guest and have that nice little push effect there. Now the trick here is with your camera, to get that push effect, what you want to do is crop your camera in as well. So when my camera is wide like this, in the second slide I've cropped the camera down so it's a bit thinner and moved it to one side, in fact that side, and brought in my guest camera. Not a very exciting guest this time, but I might want to occasionally move between me and my guest, in this case guest camera, and move myself neatly in behind the camera. So you can see on this one again, if you watch very carefully, the image of me on camera here is going to neatly sort of almost rotate and slide in behind the camera. So that just is me making my camera here a bit smaller and then hidden behind the main camera, rather than, if you just move them one over the other, it looks quite jerky and clunky. So it's just little tricks like getting that effect to look nice, which will happen once you start playing about with live motion. So here I come back again, and this time we'll do something a little bit different, I think. Me back on the top. So similar to the last one, if you watch carefully again, the secondary camera is going to sort of swing in behind me and I expand out the way. So this is me on an uncropped camera, this is me on the cropped camera, come back again, and you get that nice effect, which is quite smooth, rather than just flying things all over the place. And you'll see a bit later on, I'll show you a little trick whereby with live motion there's a tendency to perhaps fly one thing over another. I think you're better off moving them around and behind one another. It's just kind of a nicer look and feel. So that one was simple interviews. Let's have a look at some presentation stuff. So this could be my presentation slide. Now it could be that I brought in a complete slide deck if I wanted to. However, if I'm just doing something very, very simple, I might want to keep it all in Ecamm, just because that means from a processor power point of view, it's kinder. I don't have to have Keynote running or PowerPoint running or Canva or whatever else, and then worry about which one I'm moving forwards and which one I'm moving backwards in. I can just put it all in Ecamm. So the image of slide is simply a PNG image. I actually generated the slides using Gamma AI, so you can give Gamma a prompt and it will generate nice looking slides for you. And then what I have done here is brought in the image onto the screen, because I can use live motion on the images, and then I've done a couple of other things. So the highlight area where it says content creator mode at the moment, that highlight is actually a picture as well. So it's not a shape in Ecamm, because we can't get the shapes to follow live motion. So when I do this, then that is a shape moving down the way. So all I do literally is I duplicate that slide, or that scene, sorry. I duplicate the scene, and on scene A, the slider, or the highlight, is over content creator mode. Scene B, it's over don't Google, and the next one, it's over brief history. So I'm just creating 4 in a row, and literally all I'm doing is moving down that little highlight. And by the way, just to reiterate, if you hold down the shift key and move down the way, it will move in a straight line when you're building your slides up. I've also got a fancy little circle going on down the bottom here, and this was just to indicate how many slides I'd got, or how many bullet points I'd got per slide. So on to number 4. If you look very closely, that's also rotating as well, but we'll talk about that another time, how I'm doing that. But I just thought it was a nice way to do things, so let's just run back through those, and you can see that slider, and you can watch it in the first instant fly in, and then as I go down the bullet points, it actually rolls over and rotates and moves forward. So this is a start of starting to combine different elements with live motion. So let's have a look at a couple of other ones. So take it a step further. Bring out my big slide, push it back to the slide and me again. So back again. Big slide, go back one. So I'm here in this one. If there was a lot of text or information on the slide, you don't have to be on the screen all the time. It's nice to make eye contact, but it could be a bit weird if you're doing it all the time. But if you've got a lot of information on a particular slide, and you could do this with an image or a slide deck, so bear in mind, again, this could be a screen share of a presentation, and I go, whoa, here's my big presentation, go through the detailed information, flick it back to the next scene. So moving on, because I thought that was quite nice, but let's combine some more things together. So at this particular point, we're on to next week's version of the profile. So these will not be in the profile, but I wanted to show you some of the things that will be in the profile that's coming next week. So as you can see, I've got a little bit of perspective going on the slide deck and on myself. And in a very similar way as before, I am just moving down the highlight on my deck, but I'm also flipping in the guest, and in this case it's an image, but that could as well be a live camera. If I was doing an intro at the beginning of a show and saying I've got various guests coming on, then I could have my guest flip in with their name there, and they can do the wave and whatever else, pointing and things like that at the camera, and then I can bring in my guests one at a time. Now in this particular case, I've used the live motion combined with the perspective function. So I actually make the image maximum perspective. So it's a long, thin image, but the perspective turned to maximum. And then that gives me that nice sort of spin effect as I go between my different guests. So I get that nice look and feel, which is something people will not have seen before, so it will grab attention. And bear in mind, those could be live cameras that I'm doing that with. So if I come back up to the top, to the first scene here, and we'll just flick through them, and what you'll notice is that the mountaineer number one, Impossibly Good Looking Mountaineers, kind of flips round while the other one comes in. So it swaps space as if they're almost on the back of one another, and you're flipping them round. So I thought that was quite a nice feature to combine the two elements together, and a couple of other tricks that I discovered. Here's one which I need to make look a bit smarter, but you'll get the idea. And this is for a timeline, so I might be talking about where my guests are in a presentation run up, and do something along these lines. So I'm just pushing up the timeline here to let you see when these guys are in the different rooms at the different times. So Alison and Steve are on at those times, Zach and Sarah on at the following times, and Claire and James on at the end of the show. So that's just a very long, thin image, and I've put that behind the scenes, and I gradually move that up the way using the live motion. So again, you can just go have a look and see what that is like, and deconstruct it, pull it apart, have a look at it. But it's just one long, thin image that I created in Keynote, and that image effectively looks like it's being pushed up just because I move the image up per scene. So in each scene, I just move the image up a bit. Then the next scene, I move it up again. And the live motion will then push between the different scenes. So it's quite, playing about gets you in all sorts of different places, sometimes in trouble, and other times you come up with good stuff. So something else. This is what I was mentioning earlier on. So these could all be live cameras. In fact, I have my AI generated lovely group of mountaineers here to help me out, but I could bring them all in. And this is something actually myself and Neil Faramond have done with the vertical mode, because it fits beautifully into the vertical mode if you're streaming in vertical and you've got a bunch of guests. But what I wanted to do here is have my guests on next to me, and then I want to chat with them and then bring them on in order, perhaps to answer some questions or give some comments or something like that. Now I could just move the cameras and switch one over the top of each other. That gets really messy and headachy. So what I wanted to do was have a sort of carousel effect. So when I come down through these, what's actually happening is the bottom left hand image, which is quite small at the moment, moves into the big image, and the big image moves down to the bottom right, and everyone else transitions across the way. And that way you are not flying one camera over another camera, because they're always going to go in this nice carousel effect. And again, bear in mind, you wouldn't be doing this all at once. They would be on and talking for a few minutes, and once this particular Lady Mountaineer is finished, I move on to my next guest, and they talk for a few minutes, and then I carousel onto the final guest. So that's quite a nice effect. So come back next week if you want the profile for that one. And then I thought I'd try something else, or demonstrate something else that's just a little bit different. So here I could be potentially showing off products, could be anything really. So it's the Apple Watch, and I might have the wrong names for the different watches. Apologies if I have. And apologies to Apple if you're watching this. There are no watches for sale. I'm not selling watches. It's just to let you see there are other things that you can do with live motion. So in this case, I'm going to use the rotation function. So last time I remember I was using perspective and getting people to sort of flip around in perspective. This time I'm using rotation. So this is a single picture with the 4 watches on, off a circle with 4 watches. And what I'm doing is in each scene I go down, I just hit rotate, and I change the rotation from 0 to 90 to 180 to 270 and so on, and it will then rotate them through the different areas. Final rotation, back the way, and I've flown in an animated overlay. So the animated overlay, nothing to do with Ecamm. I can't get you to create that, that's created elsewhere, but it was just for effect on this particular scene. So there we are, that's a run through of what is possible. So I suggest you go have a look at those different elements, but let me take you back into the first part of the demo and show you a few bits and pieces. So back to the top of the demo. Okay, so here I am back in live demo mode, and I've gone and what I've done is I've made all of the cameras which are currently opacity 0 to opacity 100% so that I can show you where they are in the different scenes. He says, wobbling his camera and microphone unprofessionally. Not really good enough, Martin. So let's go back to the previous scene prior to this one. So this is me where I'm going to be sliding onto the scene. Now the camera is set to 100% or 0% opacity at the moment, but it's hiding behind a frame at the edge of the screen. So if I show you it here, I'm down here and I have literally cropped my camera right in to a tiny little bit like this and then hidden it behind that frame at the side of the scene. So when I come on to the next scene, you can see me sliding onto the scene. So that's what I'm going to show you, the different cameras in different positions, in some cases hidden, in other cases just set to opacity 0. So if I come back here again, you can see down here, here's my camera, and what I would do normally is set that camera to opacity 0 if I hadn't hidden it behind the frame. So I might do both, i.e. set it to opacity 0 and then bring my frame back in again. So the camera is totally hidden now, and when I come on to the next scene, I slide out from behind the frame, which is exactly what I wanted to do. So let's go to the next scene and we'll have a look at that. It will be something very similar. So here, the camera is again hidden, but behind a rectangle at the bottom of the screen. So if I get rid of that rectangle, then you can see my camera is at the bottom of the screen, and I literally have just dragged it down. I've not cropped it, I just dragged it down to the bottom of the screen. Then we'll go to the next scene. It's going to come up the way, but not very pleasant because it looks much neater if it's hiding behind the rectangle. So let's go back up to the one where the rectangle is, and you can see in my scenes I'm going to unhide that rectangle. So when I move to the next scene, it pops up from the rectangle below. So similar theme. On the left, this is my camera set to 100% opacity, and it's normally set to 0 opacity, so I've cropped it right down, and when I come to the next scene, it gives me that nice reveal. So again, on the first scene, go to my camera, and it's just a question of setting the opacity down to 0, and then I come to the next one and I can get it that nice wipe effect, so it's gone from cropped to uncropped. So that's what I've done in each case. So this time I'm not going to bother showing you in both directions. You can see the camera is there at the bottom of the screen. You get the idea now that I set the opacity to 0, tiny camera, big camera. Next one, tiny camera, but in the center of the screen, and that's where the growing element will come from. So now, top left of the screen, tiny me, set to opacity 0, but currently 100%, bigger me. So same example every single time on those ones. So let's have a look at the pop-up reveal. So all I did was crop right down to the bottom of the scene, or the bottom of the camera image there, and then it will grow up the way for me. Similar to the vertical type of reveal, I have cropped everything down, and so I'm in the middle here somewhere. And the trick here is, do not move this cropped element around. If you move it even slightly, Ecamm will think you want to come from a different location. So keep it right in the middle there, move on to your next scene, and it will expand out nicely. Now, for some reason, I think I've tried this with images and it didn't seem to work with images, but it definitely works with cameras, as you can see. And the same is true for the next one. It's just I've obviously cropped in the other direction. So let's restate that. Do not move that image around once you've cropped it in. If you do that, then Ecamm would think you're coming from the top left or the top right or left or right or somewhere else if you move that image around. So just crop it, and then it will expand nicely and it will look neat and tidy. So let's go on to the other scenes. Next one here. This is the one where my guest pushes in from the side. So what I'm doing here is two things really. I am cropping my camera in. So camera is uncropped at the moment, so I'm cropping the camera in and then moving it to that side of the screen. I should get used to pointing the right way, but I never do. So I've cropped the camera in, I move it to one side of the screen. In a similar vein, my incoming guest, actually their camera is also cropped just so that it matches mine nicely, but it's all squished up at the side of the screen at the moment. Let's bring in my my pink guest, and you can see it sliding in quite nicely. And then what I did was obviously get myself to disappear off the edge of the screen, but I wanted that sort of rotation where I go in behind the other element. So if I come over to camera A, you can see in the center of the screen there, that's where I moved camera A to. So let's go back one. We'll watch that again. So my camera is going to sort of move towards the center of the screen and a little bit smaller, and that gives me that nice sort of smooth rotation rather than sort of a clunky version of the same thing. And then I said move to hidden camera is the next scene down. So the hidden camera here is camera A, and that is over on that left hand side there. So you can see camera A is hidden, and then it just slides back the way. And that's because I wanted the slide rather than the wrap for moving in this particular direction. So back to the main one again, and this is going to do the same thing again, but the pink camera is going to wrap around the back and be a bit smaller. So there we go. And if I highlight camera B, you can see camera B is sitting behind, and again all it's done is sort of wrap round a little bit. So it's just a case of it looking neat and tidy really. So we come back to the presentation slides. I guess they're a bit simpler. There's not a lot of hiding going on this particular slide, so it's just 4 slides in a row to start with, and on each side I just duplicate the slide. So literally it's duplicating the slide, and then what I've done is moved the highlight element up or down. So if I hold the shift key down and move that up or down, if I unlock it, first of all, unlock it, so it's just labeled highlight, I just move that up or down to the appropriate location, and then I duplicate that slide and then move that down again. And the little circle at the bottom, you're going to have to wait till the next time till I tell you how I'm actually animating that one as well. But for today, that's just as simple as those are the 4 slides, and I just move the highlight down each time. So it's not much to that particular one at all, but it looks a nice effect for a simple agenda. And if you quickly needed a slide and knocked it together and you don't want to have those 2 screens and multiple things running at once, this might be an easy way to do things. And the bit that I like as well, which is just the switch to the large slide, all I'm doing here is moving all of the elements. So there's the long rectangle, the circle, and the camera, all hiding in the background, and all I've done is got those to nicely move around the back. So let's go back up to the smaller slide and then go back to the large slide, and you can see everything just neatly moves behind in a sort of tidy manner. And then when I come back out again, it spreads everything out neatly. So just a nice way to do things there. And lastly, for today anyway, the perspective version of the same thing. So that was a slow crossover dissolve, or slower crossover dissolve to this scene. So sitting on this scene, what is in the background. I've got a folder here labeled hidden, and the Mountaineer, the first Mountaineer, is hidden in the background here. So if I come to that one and I just make it opacity 100% so that you can see, then that one is set to maximum perspective or minimum perspective, whichever way you want to look at it, so that when I go to the next scene, that effectively is going to go from that perspective element and twist round to more or less flat. So there she is, just twisting around to flat. And in this particular case, Mountaineer 2 is hidden behind the scenes, and you're not going to be able to see that unless I bring it to the top. I suppose I could, so let's just do that. His opacity is set to 0. We'll bring him up to 100%, and I'll just put him on the top for a minute. So there he is on the top, and he just flicks in. So let's not ruin that scene. Let's go back and put him where he's meant to be, which is in the hidden element. And again, we're just setting his opacity to 0. And when we go to the next scene, it flicks through to Steve showing nicely. And it's the same principle for the remaining ones as well. So each time I am, excuse me, just flicking through the additional ones. So in this particular case, when you come down to the next scene, then I need to hide away behind the scenes Mountaineer 1 as well, and Mountaineer 3, because Mountaineer 3 is going to come up on the next scene. So you need to think of it as 3 scenes in a row effectively. So build in, action, build out, if you want to term it that way. So I am building out Mountaineer 1, I am building in Mountaineer 2, and I'm preparing to bring in Mountaineer 3 on the following scene. So on this scene, you'll see it's Mountaineer 3, Mountaineer 2, Mountaineer 4. And the next one, Mountaineer 4, Mountaineer 3. So I've just lost the previous one eventually. So going through the ones in the middle, you just need to know that you need to have the one you're just about to let go, because that needs to disappear nicely, the one that's coming in, and then you need to prepare for the next scene, so you have that third one there to go into the next one. But you can just try that yourself. If you're really clever, you might want to put those in as cameras and then add in all the perspective on all the cameras and see what that looks like with live cameras, because that should look pretty cool. So I think that's more or less it for showing you behind the scenes for today. Get yourself over to the Stream Profiles store, download this profile and go have a play about. There isn't any sort of specific guidelines or playbook or instruction manuals for live motion, so just get creative and get a bit flexible with it and play about. Try not to do just the same as everybody else does, make it look a little bit different. So in terms of goodbye for the evening, I ought to say special thanks to my guests Alison, Steve, Zach, Sarah, James and Claire, I think. And if you go over to the store, you will find that it looks something like this. That's the profile you want to go for. You will have to go through the whole put your details into the store. You are signing in or opting into our mailing list. You can unsubscribe at any point, but why would you do that? Because then you won't find out about the next free profile that's coming along next week, that is going to show you through the timelines, the carousel and the rotation elements and how I'll put those together. So I'll talk you through those, hopefully in a slightly less busy week next week. But for now, I think that's cheerio from Edinburgh. Hope you enjoy this. See you later. Bye-bye.
So thanks, Martin, for that very informative tutorial on how to use live motion. If you want to get in contact with Ecamm, go to ecamm.com/community, where you'll find a number of different resources and helpful tips and tricks and tools to get you started on your Ecamm journey.